Welcome to the Ashtour Project Site Manager training video for the Georgia Department of Transportation, presented by Infotech Inc. This video is entitled Receiving Samples in the Labs and LIMS. In this video, you'll receive instruction about the following topics: understanding the receive sample workflow, understanding filter criteria, receiving samples at destination labs, and receiving samples in lab units. To demonstrate Site Manager materials and LIMS for you today, I will use the Georgia Department of Transportation Customized Site Manager training environment containing GDOT data and customizations that GDOT has developed for non-agency materials users. At GDOT, you will access Site Manager and LIMS through Citrix. Log on to Citrix following the instructions provided to you by GDOT. You will then log on to Site Manager via GDOT's virtual applications. Depending on your agency process, before a lab technician can enter test results in LIMS, the sample must be received at a destination lab and/or lab unit. LIMS security and the GDOT customizations determine the samples that are available to you. You will only have access to samples associated with your organization. You cannot access sample records or tests associated with other companies or contractors. If a contract is associated to a sample record, you must also have contract authority on that contract, or you will not have access to the sample. And so now we're on the navigation panel. And let's first go into the Receive Sample at Destination Lab panel and discuss filtering in LIMS. Double-click Receive Sample at Destination Lab, and we're opened into that window. You can use filtering in LIMS to adjust which samples you see in the list here. This makes it easier to categorize or group samples or to find specific samples. So I want to find all of the samples from my organization that are ready to be received in the destination lab. So the first thing I'm going to do in the Select Sample Location field is click the drop-down arrow and select my organization. For training, I'll select the field lab. And you can see that Site Manager has shown me a number of sample records that I can receive. Another way that you can limit exactly what sample records you're seeing is to use the filter criteria. You can filter by any of the column headings in this window. So let's create a filter. In the first filter criteria field, I'll click the drop-down arrow and select Sample ID. In the second filter criteria drop-down list, Contains is already there. I'm going to leave Contains, although you could choose a different operator if you wanted to. In the text box, I'm going to type REC-A. I'm looking for a sample whose sample ID contains REC-A in capital letters. This is case sensitive. And I will click the Apply button. And LIMS has displayed the sample record that meets my specific criteria. So now that I've filtered the list of samples, I'm ready to receive the appropriate sample, or you can receive multiple samples in the destination lab. I have this one that I want to receive today. So in the row for the sample ID ending in REC-A, I'm going to click in the Sample Received checkbox. Now I can also enter, view, or modify remarks in this window. So let's enter a remark for this sample. On the toolbar, there is a button called a Remarks button. I'll click that, and that opens a Remarks text box. In this field, I'm going to type my remark. I will type sample container damaged. And then I'm going to add my user ID and the date. Train 01. GDOT policy is to record your user ID and the date when you put in a remark so that people will know who put that remark in. I'll click the Remarks button again on the toolbar to close my remarks box. And now we're ready to save our sample. When I click, or save that we've received our sample, when I click the Save button, our sample disappears from the list. LIMS has progressed that sample to the Receive Sample in the Lab Unit queue, so it's no longer available here to us. Before I move on, I want to clear my filter. LIMS will retain your filter criteria until you click the Reset button, so I'll click that now. And now you see that Site Manager has cleared the filter and displays the rest of the records that were in my list. So I've received my sample in the destination lab, and now I'm ready to receive it in the lab unit. So I'm going to close this window. I'll click the Close button on the toolbar. And I want to go into the Receive Sample in the Lab Unit window, so I'll double-click that icon. Now, please note that some lab units may have authority to bypass receiving the sample in the destination lab. If that's the case, you can come straight into this window. As before, I can use my filtering options to narrow down my list of samples. So right now in the Select Lab field, I'm going to click my drop-down arrow and I need to click my Field Lab unit. And here is the sample that I received just now in the destination lab. This is the only sample I received in the destination lab, so that's why this is the only sample available to me to receive in the lab unit. So for my row, for sample ID ending in Receive A, RECA, I'll click the Sample Received checkbox, and I'm ready to save this. So when I click the Save button, Site Manager progresses this sample record to the next queue in the LIMS workflow, which is the Enter Test Results queue. So it's no longer available to us in this list. So I'm ready to close my window and exit Site Manager. I'll click the Close button, and I will then click the File menu, Exit Application, and are you sure you want to exit the application? Yes, I am. I'll click the Yes button. The next training video will demonstrate entering test results in LIMS.